So, but
Absolutely.
otherwise, a grown man, I've seen the 6'5", have a flashback to when he was, and he shared this at one of our events, one of our galas. He said, "Thank you for the work that you do." He came up to me, and someone brought him up to me. He's a beautiful tuxedo, elegant gentleman, monogram handcuffs. I mean, the cuffs on his shirt,
Mhm.
everything, the cufflinks, and said, "Thank you for the work that you do." And I said, "Well, thank you." And he
Mhm.
said, "We want to support this work, that this message goes forward." Why? He said, "Because I was the 6-year-old boy under the bed who was hiding
Mm.
when my father was attacking my mother."
Oh my
Mm.
goodness.
He said, "And
So
then I
it's
became the 16-year-old boy who was fighting off my mother's boyfriends."
oh my
Mm.
goodness. And to
So,
have to work
flashback.
through, yeah, to have to work through all of the memories and the experiences, and then to turn those around. I mean, it's safe to say that once those coping mechanisms are in place and that forgiveness is in
Mhm.
place, that they can build a better life story as a survivor
And become productive and
and
become
become
Mhm.
productive.
self-sufficient and
Mhm.
really
Yes,
begin to enjoy life
Yes.
instead
yes,
of walking on eggshells with life, and instead
yes,
of uh, being so defensive in life. That's
absolutely.
a whole nother
Absolutely.
conversation,
Mhm.
being very,
Absolutely.
very defensive and even
Mhm.
self-critical of themselves and others. So
Yes.
they begin to re-engage in life instead of being a spectator.
Mm. So speaking of, you had mentioned a couple of examples in the our scenario, Michelle. We'll move on to just talk a little bit about in our presentation here, the silence. So we
Mm.
mentioned flashbacks, but now we'll move to this silence. So an article from the website nofilmschool.com entitled "Why More Filmmakers Should Use Silence in Their Work" states that silence can significantly enhance the storytelling and emotional impact of a film. Some general reasons filmmakers use silence. So it can enhance storytelling, create emotional depth, engage audiences in a more profound way. Other specific reason, you can look at it as amplifying the emotion, building tension and suspense. And we mentioned the tension before. Highlight visual storytelling, creating an atmosphere and mood, enhancing realism, focus on character inner thoughts, just seeing them pondering what they're thinking in their minds, and decisions and things of that nature. It can be also contrast with sound. And then there's a terminology from the article: economic storytelling and then artistic expression. So when we're talking about economic storytelling, we're not necessarily talking about the economic status of the characters, although that is, that definitely can add to the backstory or whatever of a character. That adds to the storyline. But what we're talking about here is showing rather than telling. So it allows an audience to draw their own conclusions without being guided by words, economic storytelling. So it's like, you're using just the bare minimum of silence in that economic storytelling. So it was an interesting term. So for Vanessa, we'll jump back to you from a filmmaking standpoint. How is silence used in The Atonement to show the audience what a character is feeling rather than telling them? Are there any unusual or creative ways you used silence intentionally?
Well, yes, I can go back to the pilot that we shot, and of course, it would be, of course, writing, you know, but I wouldn't necessarily that wouldn't have anything to do with the writing. It would be more of the director
Mm.
working with the DP, director, photographer, and also may perhaps the lighting. But I always do stress to use ambient noise. There's something about just using background noise, chirping, nature
Mm-hmm.
sounds, and also close-up shots. I'm a big fan of using close-up shots, even when I work behind the camera, when I work with other DPs. I love close-ups, capturing the emotion, the tears. But before we
Mhm.
do all that, we do a quick rehearsal and work with the actors. And if the actors have any suggestions that they want to bring about, if they, oh, well, what if I do it this way? And then we say, okay, that works. That looks great. That's what we want. We want to build that. We want to build that tension. There were moments when we were filming, um, and we had an actor who actually cried, really
Mm.
cried. There was no special effects, so we wanted to capture that moment because that person was thinking about a sad news report they heard about, so they got emotional about that. And
Mhm.
with the silence, it really reels, I think, the viewer in as to what um, the characters are, or their interaction, either through motion, movement, fidgeting, sniffing, those kinds of things, to make it more real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
From a domestic violence or intimate partner violence perspective, looking at instances of silence. So, in other words, when a victim, if we're talking about someone who is currently, involved in just this horrible situation, when they choose silence or the bystander effect, and we talked about that in the first webinar. So, an example, instead of engaging with an abuser, for instance, recurring arguments, the one who's being abused chooses silence out of fear. Michelle, what should the person who is experiencing that say or do? Should they, how do they engage with someone who is doing this to them? Just some advice that you could share with us if they're in that situation.
Um, I
They're
am
choosing in other words, they're choosing to be silent out of fear.
mhm, mhm. Okay, how do I preface this? Okay. Even as we're talking about this topic, one of my favorite songs that's resonating, and I love this song when it came out, is by uh, is it Garfunkel and Simon,
Okay.
the sounds of silence.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And he wrote that song as a um homage to people, that people can be around a lot of people, but it's silent because they're not communicating. Okay,
Mm.
they're
Mhm.
not communicating. The
Mhm.
sounds of silence, and it goes like with hello darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again. So it's, you're in a darkness, but there's still people around you, but you're in this shell. So the individual who is, and it's somewhat of a shunning, if you will, it was being shunned. If that is you or that person,
Hmm.
um, we I recommend, first of all, is that you need to build a network of friends beyond this individual.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yes.
And again, this is part of the healing process, because
Hmm.
when people are in abusive relationships, they become to literally be almost inbred. It's just
Yes.
the two of them in that cycle, in that sick, unhealthy relationship.
Hmm.
But stepping outside and building other friendships, okay,
Hmm.
beyond what's happening in the home front. Okay,
Yes.
so you can communicate there, that's your outlet. Otherwise, the dynamic of it is it will cause the individual to lose their voice,
Mhm.
to
Hmm.
become small, that they
Yes.
literally downsize themselves to please the abuser. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
but someone's got to want to break those behaviors. So I know
Hmm.
what we're talking about here is, what can she or he do? The first step is they have got to want to get well.
Yes.
They've got to want to do it. So again,
Mhm.
that's why I commend you, Vanessa, in sharing this story to come alongside of individuals like myself who are on the front
Mhm.
lines working with
Yes.
people to
Mhm.
showcase and get it out there in a larger degree of, this is what happens, these are the dynamics, so
Yes.
that individuals like myself, we can continue to further educate on the
Mhm.
different
Hmm.
layers that's out here,
Mhm.
to avoid someone losing their life
Yes.
from the abuser, or even
Mhm.
from themselves
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
committing the word online, the unaliving
Yes.
themselves
Mhm.
Yes.
because they have allow themselves to become so small, they literally die from the inside out. Okay,
Absolutely. Thank
so
you so much,
that
Michelle.
is, it is key, and to have those spaces in the movie allows the viewer to reflect, to think
Yes.
Yes.
about their own
Mhm.
childhood,
Absolutely.
their own
Mhm.
growing up experience, their own
Mhm.
generational relational patterns.
Mhm.
Okay, and to
Yes.
Absolutely.
even think about, wow, how can I change something so it's not repeated in my family or with my children or in my
Mhm.
community? It allows people to
Absolutely.
think.
And that's
Yep.
exactly what we hope, the Atonement series does for those who are viewing it and who, may have experienced these types of things in their own lives. So, for the sake of time, we'll just read a little bit about the body language before we move on to the next slide. Just quickly from the website industrialscripts.com, an article entitled "How to Write Subtext: Unlocking Hidden Depths of Dialogue." So, subtext can do the following: can elevate a story's dialogue, create layers of meaning, add depth, tension, and intrigue to a narrative. And then in that article, there's a section called Using Body Language to Convey Subtext. Body language can replace words. So, speaking of nonverbal cues, they can include the following: gestures, facial expressions, posture. These things can convey the emotions that words alone cannot. So, just wanted to touch on, the body language aspect when we're talking about the intentional choices around flashbacks, silence, or body language. Showing emotional and physical abuse. So, what is the importance of showing emotional abuse, not just physical? So, two key